One second, you feel safe. And then,
The police are on their way.
well, you still do.
"He's just an old friend with money," Samantha explained, her fingers dancing across her phone screen as another message from R. Ashford lit up the display. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing security protocols for a client. 22 years in IT security had taught me to notice patterns, and the pattern of Richard Ashford's name appearing on my wife's phone had become impossible to ignore. "Say hi for me," I replied, keeping my voice casual while my mind cataloged this as the 14th time this week his name had appeared. She smiled, that practiced smile she'd perfected during her climb up the corporate ladder at Meridian Tech. "You're so funny, Daniel. It's just business networking. Richard has connections that could help my career. Old friends with money don't typically send messages at 11:30 on a Tuesday night." But I didn't say that. Instead, I watched her gather her purse and keys, noting how she'd started wearing that expensive perfume again, the one she claimed was a gift from her sister. "Another late meeting?" I asked. "Charity Planning Committee. The annual gala is next month, and Richard's Family Foundation is the main sponsor." She paused at the mirror in our hallway, adjusting her hair. "Don't wait up. These things run long." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone in our pristine living room. Everything in perfect order, just like Samantha preferred, just like the lie she'd been constructing for months. I'd been collecting evidence for exactly 4 months and 13 days, not because I'm naturally suspicious, but because I'm naturally thorough. When your job involves protecting companies from people who lie for a living, you develop certain instincts. The first red flag had been subtle, a receipt for dinner at Chez Laurent that fell from her purse. 2 entrees, expensive wine, dessert. She'd claimed to be at a work conference that evening. Conferences don't typically serve lobster thermidor. The second flag was the jewelry. A tennis bracelet that appeared on her wrist one morning, sparkling with what looked like genuine diamonds. "Early bonus," she'd explained. "They loved my presentation on employee retention." Meridian Tech doesn't give jewelry bonuses. I'd checked. By the third flag, a weekend trip to Martha's Vineyard that she claimed was a girls' retreat with her friend Sophie, I'd started documenting everything. Hotel receipts that showed single occupancy upgraded to suites, credit card statements showing purchases at men's clothing stores, phone records that painted a very different picture than the one she presented each evening over dinner. I pulled out my laptop and opened the encrypted folder I'd labeled Project Verification. Inside were 4 months of carefully organized evidence. Photos of receipts, screenshots of social media posts, copies of financial records, and a detailed timeline that would make any prosecutor proud. Richard Ashford, 45 years old, heir to the Ashford shipping fortune, married to Victoria Ashford for 18 years. 2 children at boarding school, member of the country club where Samantha had suddenly developed an interest in tennis lessons. His generosity knew no bounds, apparently. The apartment he'd rented in the Harbor District, officially listed as a corporate retreat space, but used exclusively for afternoon meetings with my wife. The car payments for her new BMW, traced through a shell company registered to Ashford Holdings. The jewelry, the clothes, the sudden improvement in her wardrobe that she attributed to finally understanding fashion. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya, my colleague and the closest thing I had to a friend in this sterile town we'd moved to for Samantha's career. "Beer? You look like you need to talk." Maya Chen had been my programming partner for 3 years. Sharp as a blade, loyal as a dog, and blessed with the kind of hacking skills that made our cybersecurity firm very successful. She'd also been the one to suggest I start documenting Samantha's activities after I'd mentioned the mysterious dinner receipts. "Murphy's Tavern, 20 minutes, I texted back. Murphy's was the kind of place Samantha would never set foot in. Dark wood, older clientele, and absolutely no networking opportunities, perfect for conversations that required privacy. Maya was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and scrolling through her tablet. She looked up as I approached, her expression immediately shifting to concern. "You look terrible," she said without preamble. "What did you find now?" I slid into the booth across from her and signaled the bartender. "She's at another charity meeting with her old friend." "The one with money?" "The very one." I accepted my beer and took a long drink. I've been thinking about that phrase, old friend with money. It's interesting how she always mentions the money part. Maya leaned forward. Because real friends don't need financial qualifications? Exactly. When you talk about actual friends, you mention what you like about them, their humor, their loyalty, their shared history. You don't lead with their net worth unless that's the primary attraction. So what's your next move? I pulled out my phone and showed her the latest addition to my evidence collection. A series of photos taken from the parking garage across from the Ashford Holdings building. Samantha's car parked in the executive level, time stamps showing 3-hour visits during her supposed lunch breaks. "I'm going to make a phone call," I said. Maya raised an eyebrow. "To who?" "Victoria Ashford, Richard's wife. I think she might be interested in learning about her husband's charitable activities." The look on Maya's face shifted from concern to something approaching admiration. "You've been planning this?" "For weeks. Victoria Ashford comes from old Boston money, the kind of family where reputation matters more than happiness. She married Richard to combine 2 shipping fortunes, and according to the society pages, she takes the family name very seriously." "And you think she doesn't know?" "I think she suspects, but doesn't have proof. Rich wives often know their husbands cheat, but they need documentation for the lawyers, especially when there's a prenup involved." Maya grinned. "An infidelity clause?" "Standard in marriages like theirs. Cheating spouse forfeits significant assets, but you need evidence that would stand up in court." "Which you have." "Which I have." I finished my beer and stood up. "Tomorrow morning I'm going to call Victoria Ashford and offer to share what I've learned about her husband's friendship with my wife." "And then?" "Then we find out how quickly old money moves when it's protecting itself." I drove home through streets that had never felt like home. Samantha had chosen this town, this house, this life. I'd simply followed along, focused on my work, and trusting that she was building something worthwhile for both of us. The house was dark when I arrived. Samantha wouldn't be home for hours if she came home at all. Her overnight trips had become more frequent lately, always with plausible explanations, always with just enough detail to sound credible. I went to my office and pulled up the file I'd been building on Victoria Ashford. Social media posts that painted a picture of a woman who valued control and precision. Charity work that focused on family values and community stability. Board positions at organizations that prized discretion and traditional morals. She would not appreciate learning that her husband was financing another woman's lifestyle. My research had uncovered something else interesting about Victoria Ashford. She wasn't just old money, she was smart money. MBA from Wharton. Served on the boards of 3 major corporations. Had successfully managed hostile takeovers of 2 competing shipping companies. Richard might have the family name, but Victoria had the business acumen. And according to the financial records I'd managed to access, most of their liquid assets were held in accounts that required both signatures. If Victoria decided to freeze those accounts, Richard's generosity toward my wife would end immediately. I opened a new document and began typing a letter. Not an angry accusation or an emotional plea, but a professional communication from one spouse to another. Clear, factual, and supported by documentation. The evidence spoke for itself. Hotel records showing Richard and Samantha checking in together. Credit card receipts for gifts that had appeared in our home. Financial transfers from Ashford Holdings to accounts that had paid for her car, her apartment, her new wardrobe. 4 months of careful documentation, organized chronologically and cross-referenced for verification. The kind of evidence package that lawyers dream about and cheating spouses have nightmares about. I finished the letter at 2 in the morning. Samantha still wasn't home. Her latest text had come at midnight. Running late, staying at Sophie's tonight, love you. Sophie lived in the opposite direction from where Richard's corporate apartment was located. But then Samantha had never been particularly creative with her lies. I printed the letter and the evidence package, sealed everything in a manila envelope, and placed it on my desk. Tomorrow morning, I would make the phone call that would change everything. "Say hi for me," I'd told her as she left for her meeting. Tomorrow, I would make sure that greeting was delivered exactly as intended. Victoria Ashford answered on the third ring. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to important calls. "Mrs. Ashford, my name is Daniel Mercer. I believe you know my wife Samantha." A pause. "I'm not familiar with that name." "She's been working closely with your husband on several charitable projects. I have some information about their collaboration that I think you'd find interesting." The silence stretched longer this time. When Victoria spoke again, her tone had shifted from polite dismissal to careful attention. "What kind of information, Mr. Mercer?" "The kind that's better discussed in person. Would you be available for coffee this morning?" "I have a busy schedule." "I understand, but I think you'll want to see what I've discovered about how your husband spends his charitable budget." Another pause. "Meridian Cafe on Harbor Street, 1 hour." The line went quiet. I gathered my evidence package and drove to Harbor Street, passing the building where Richard maintained his corporate apartment. Samantha's car wasn't in the parking garage this morning, but then she was probably still at Sophie's house. Meridian Cafe was the kind of place where wealthy women met to discuss charity work and social obligations. Expensive coffee, quiet atmosphere, and enough privacy for sensitive conversations. Victoria Ashford was already seated at a corner table when I arrived. She was smaller than I'd expected from her photos, but her presence filled the space around her. Designer clothes that whispered rather than shouted wealth. Jewelry that spoke of family heirlooms rather than recent purchases. "Mr. Mercer." She stood to shake my hand. Her grip was firm and brief. "Please, sit." I placed the manila envelope on the table between us. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Your phone call was intriguing. You mentioned charitable projects?" "Among other things." I opened the envelope and withdrew the first document. "This is a timeline of meetings between your husband and my wife over the past 4 months. As you can see, they've been quite dedicated to their work together." Victoria studied the document, her expression neutral. "These appear to be hotel records." "They are. The Marriott Harbor View, the Seaside Inn, the corporate suites on Elm Street. Always the same pattern. Check in at noon, check out at 4 p.m. I placed the second document on the table. "These are credit card receipts from your husband's personal account, jewelry purchases, clothing, restaurant bills for 2 people. Victoria's fingers traced the dates on the receipts. "This bracelet cost $8,000. My wife was wearing it when she came home from a charity planning meeting 3 weeks ago." The third document was a photograph of the BMW in our driveway. "This car is registered to a subsidiary of Ashford Holdings. The payments come directly from your husband's discretionary fund." Victoria looked up from the papers. "How did you obtain these records?" "I'm a cybersecurity consultant. Financial forensics is part of what I do." I leaned back in my chair. "Your husband has been very generous with his charitable giving. Unfortunately, the primary beneficiary appears to be my wife, rather than any recognized nonprofit organization." "How long have you known?" "I suspected for months. I've been documenting for 4 months and 13 days." Victoria gathered the documents and studied them more carefully. Her movements were precise, methodical. She was evaluating evidence the same way she would review a business proposal. "What do you want from me, Mr. Mercer?" "Nothing. I'm simply providing information that I thought you should have." "And what do you expect me to do with this information?" I met her gaze directly. "That's entirely your decision. But if I were in your position, I'd want to know how my family's money was being spent." Victoria closed the folder and placed it in her purse. "I assume you have copies of everything?" "Of course. And your intentions regarding your marriage?" "That depends on several factors." She nodded slowly. "I see. And if those factors were to change, if, for example, my husband's financial situation were to become more constrained, would that influence your decisions?" "It might." Victoria stood and extended her hand again. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Mercer. I'll be in touch." She left the cafe with the same quiet authority she'd brought to our meeting. No drama, no emotional outbursts, no threats or promises. Just a businesswoman who'd received information that would inform her next decisions. I finished my coffee and drove home. Samantha's car was in the driveway, which meant she'd returned from her overnight stay at Sophie's house. She was in the kitchen when I entered, still wearing yesterday's clothes, but trying to look as if she'd been home all night. "Good morning," she said brightly. "You're up early. Had a meeting. How was your evening with Sophie?" "Oh, you know how it is. We talked too late and I didn't want to drive home." She poured coffee into her travel mug. "I should get to the office. Big presentation today." "Anyone I know?" "Just the usual suspects. Richard will be there, of course. His foundation is considering a major donation to our employee wellness program." I nodded. "Give him my regards." She kissed my cheek, a quick perfunctory gesture, and headed for the door. "I might be late tonight. We're celebrating if the presentation goes well." "Of course you are." After she left, I returned to my office and opened my laptop. If Victoria Ashford moved as quickly as I suspected she would, today was going to be very interesting. My phone rang at 10:30. Maya. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected. Victoria Ashford is exactly what I hoped she'd be." "Which is?" "Smart, decisive, and protective of her family's reputation." "Think she'll act on it?" "I think she already has." At 11:15, my phone rang again. Unknown number. "Mr. Mercer? This is Victoria Ashford. I wanted to thank you again for our conversation this morning." "You're welcome. I thought you might be interested to know that I've had a very productive morning. My attorneys have been quite busy." "I see. Asset protection is so important in uncertain times, don't you think? One never knows when financial situations might change unexpectedly." "Very wise." "Indeed. I suspect the next 24 hours will be quite eventful for everyone involved." The line went quiet. I spent the afternoon working on client projects, but my attention kept drifting to my phone, waiting for the call I knew would come. It came at 4:47 p.m. "Daniel?" Samantha's voice was tight with panic. "Something's wrong. Richard's accounts have been frozen. His wife filed some kind of emergency motion with the court. He can't access any of his money." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. The presentation was a disaster. He couldn't commit to anything because his lawyers told him not to sign any new agreements." "Why would that affect you?" A pause. "It doesn't, directly. But we've been working so closely on these projects, and if his foundation can't move forward, I'm sure you'll figure something out." "Daniel, I might need to stay in town tonight. Richard is really upset, and the team needs to regroup and figure out our next steps." "Of course. Take all the time you need." "You're not angry?" "Why would I be angry? You're just helping an old friend with money problems." Another pause. "Right, exactly. I'll call you later." She didn't call later. At 9 p.m. I received a text. "Crisis mode here. Staying at Sophie's again. This situation is really complicated." At 9:30, Maya called. "I've been monitoring social media," she said. The Ashford divorce filing is already making waves in the society pages. Apparently, Victoria moved fast and hard. What are they saying? Irreconcilable differences, with a side of financial impropriety. The reporters are having a field day with the asset freeze. Richard's been locked out of everything: bank accounts, credit cards, even his corporate apartment. His corporate apartment? Victoria claimed it in the emergency filing, said it was purchased with marital assets for non-business purposes. The locks were changed this afternoon. I smiled for the first time in months. Thorough. There's more. Victoria's lawyers filed a motion requiring Richard to account for every expenditure from his discretionary funds for the past year, every hotel bill, every gift, every dinner for two. She works fast. Old money doesn't mess around when it comes to protecting itself. Richard's going to have to explain every penny he spent on your wife. And Samantha? Well, that's the interesting part. If Richard can't pay for her apartment, her car, or her lifestyle anymore, she'll have to make some difficult choices. Exactly. Maya paused. What's your next move? I looked around our pristine living room with its carefully chosen furniture and perfectly arranged accessories. Everything Samantha had selected to project the image of success and sophistication. I think it's time to have a conversation about old friends and their financial limitations. When? Tomorrow morning, after she discovers that her credit cards don't work anymore. You froze her accounts? I didn't have to. Richard's been paying most of her bills through various shell companies. When Victoria froze his assets, she inadvertently froze everything he was funding. Maya laughed. You really thought this through. 4 months and 13 days of thinking, Maya. I wanted to make sure I got it right. And if she comes home tonight? She won't. She's probably trying to figure out where she's going to sleep now that Richard's corporate apartment is off limits. I was right. Samantha didn't come home that night, but her credit cards started getting declined at 7 a.m. the next morning. Samantha's first call came at 7:23 a.m. Daniel, something's wrong with my credit card. The hotel won't accept it. Which hotel? A pause. I'm at the Harbor Inn. Sophie's apartment had a plumbing emergency, so I got a room for the night. The Harbor Inn was 3 blocks from Richard's corporate apartment. Convenient location for someone whose usual accommodations had suddenly become unavailable. Have you tried calling the credit card company? They said the account has been suspended pending verification of recent charges. What does that even mean? It meant that Victoria Ashford's attorneys had been thorough in their asset freeze. Any account that had received payments from Richard's funds was now under scrutiny. I'm sure it's just a computer error, I said. These things usually resolve themselves. But I need to pay for the room, and I have that lunch meeting with the foundation board today. Maybe Richard can help. He's good with financial matters. Another pause. Richard's dealing with his own problems right now. His wife is being completely unreasonable about their marital issues. That's unfortunate. Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out. Daniel, could you maybe come pick me up? I don't have enough cash for a taxi, and my car payment seems to have bounced. Her car payment had bounced because it was automatically deducted from an account funded by Ashford Holdings, an account that no longer existed in any practical sense. I'm swamped with work today. Can't you call Sophie? Sophie's not available right now. Sophie wasn't available because Maya had sent Sophie's husband some interesting photos from social media. Photos of Sophie having lunch with a man who wasn't her husband. Photos that had been taken on days when Sophie claimed to be having lunch with Samantha. When you build a network of lies, every connection becomes a vulnerability. I'm sorry, Samantha. I really can't get away from the office today. Fine. I'll figure it out myself. She hung up. The second call came at noon. Daniel, I need you to transfer some money to my checking account. There seems to be a problem with several of my automatic payments. How much money? 5,000 should cover it, just until I can sort out this credit card situation. $5,000. Enough to pay for her apartment, her car, and her other monthly expenses. the expenses that Richard had been covering through his network of shell companies and discretionary funds. That's a lot of money, Samantha. It's temporary. I'll pay you back as soon as this gets resolved. Pay me back with what? Your salary barely covers your shopping budget. Silence. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been wondering how you afford your lifestyle on an HR director's salary. The jewelry, the clothes, the expensive dinners. It doesn't add up. I've been very careful with my money. Have you? Because I've been looking at our finances, and your expenses have increased significantly over the past 4 months. You've been spying on me. I've been trying to understand how we can afford the life you've been living. This is ridiculous. I need help with a temporary financial problem, and you're interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm not interrogating you. I'm asking reasonable questions about unreasonable expenses. She hung up again. The third call came at 4 p.m. Daniel, I'm coming home. We need to talk. Of course, I'll be here. She arrived at 5:30, looking frazzled in a way I hadn't seen since her early days climbing the corporate ladder. Her usual polish was cracked, revealing the stress underneath. We need to discuss our financial situation, she said without preamble. I agree. She sat across from me in our living room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. There seems to be some confusion about my accounts. What kind of confusion? Several of my payments have been declined. My credit cards aren't working. Even my gym membership was suspended. That does sound confusing. I think someone might be targeting me because of my association with Richard. His divorce is getting messy, and his wife might be trying to hurt anyone connected to him. Interesting theory. Not entirely wrong, but missing some crucial details. Why would Richard's divorce affect your accounts? I don't know. Maybe Victoria thinks I have some kind of business relationship with Richard that threatens her settlement. Do you have a business relationship with Richard? Of course not. We're just friends working on charitable projects. Friends don't usually pay each other's bills. Her composure slipped. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up and walked to my desk, returning with a manila folder. It means I've been doing some research into our household finances. I opened the folder and placed the first document in front of her. Her car payment records, showing payments from an account registered to Ashford Holdings. This is your car payment history. Notice anything interesting about the funding source? Her face went pale. I don't understand. The second document. Credit card statements showing payments from the same Ashford Holdings account. Your credit card payments, same source. The third document. Rent payments for an apartment I'd never seen, funded by the same account. And this appears to be rent for an apartment in the Harbor District, the same building where Richard maintains his corporate office. Samantha stared at the documents without speaking. So, you can understand my confusion, I continued, when you say Richard is just an old friend. Because old friends don't typically pay for apartments, cars, and credit cards. Daniel, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me show you the rest. I placed hotel receipts on the table, jewelry purchase records, restaurant bills for expensive dinners I'd never attended. 4 months of expenses paid by your old friend with money, quite generous of him. She looked up from the papers, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. It's not what you think. What do I think, Samantha? You think I'm having an affair. Are you? The question hung in the air between us. 4 months of evidence, 4 months of lies, 4 months of careful documentation leading to this moment. It's complicated, she said, finally. Complicated how? Richard and I, we have a connection, a friendship that developed into something more expensive, apparently. He wanted to help me. He said I deserved better than what I had. What you had was a marriage. What you have now is a financial arrangement with a married man whose wife just froze all his assets. She flinched. His situation is temporary. Is it? Because from what I understand, Victoria Ashford is very thorough when it comes to protecting her family's money. How would you know anything about Victoria Ashford? I smiled. Because I called her yesterday morning and shared some interesting information about how her husband spends his charitable budget. The color drained completely from Samantha's face. You did what? I called his wife and showed her the evidence I'd been collecting. Hotel records, financial transfers, gift receipts. Everything you see on this table, plus quite a bit more. You had no right to do that. I had every right. Richard was spending marital assets on another woman. Victoria deserved to know where her money was going. Samantha stood up abruptly. You've ruined everything. I've clarified everything. Your old friend with money doesn't have access to his money anymore, which means your friendship is about to become significantly less expensive. This is temporary. Victoria can't freeze his assets permanently. Maybe not, but she can make him account for every penny he spent on you, and when that information becomes part of the divorce proceedings, it becomes public record. Public record? Hotel stays, gift purchases, apartment rentals, all documented as evidence of marital infidelity. The society pages are going to love this story. She sank back into her chair. You've destroyed my reputation. I've exposed your choices. There's a difference. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Mercer, this is Victoria Ashford. Thought you might like to know that my husband's assets will remain frozen pending a complete audit of his discretionary spending. My attorneys estimate this process will take several months. Thank you again for your assistance. I showed the message to Samantha. Several months, I said. That's a long time to go without financial support from old friends. She read the message twice, her hands shaking slightly. What happens now? She asked. Now you make some choices. You can try to maintain your current lifestyle without Richard's financial support, or you can make some adjustments. What kind of adjustments? I walked to the front door and returned with 2 suitcases I'd packed that morning. The kind that start with finding a new place to live. She stared at the suitcases. You're throwing me out? I'm giving you the freedom to pursue your friendship with Richard without the complications of a marriage. Daniel, please. We can work this out. Can we? Because I'm having trouble understanding what we'd be working with. Your income barely covers your expenses now that Richard's support has been eliminated. Your reputation is about to become a matter of public record, and your old friend is going to be spending the next several months explaining his generosity to divorce attorneys. I made mistakes. You made choices. Expensive choices that someone else was paying for. She looked around our living room as if seeing it for the first time. This is my home too. This home was purchased with my income and my credit. The mortgage is in my name. Your name is on the deed as a courtesy, but your financial contribution has been minimal. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Maybe your old friend can help. Oh, wait. His accounts are frozen. She sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the evidence scattered across our coffee table. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, but take it somewhere else. She stood up slowly and picked up the suitcases. This isn't over. Yes, it is. She walked to the door, then turned back. You're going to regret this. I regret a lot of things, Samantha. Trusting you, believing your lies, moving to this town for your career, but ending this marriage isn't one of them. She left without another word. I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: relief. 3 days passed in blissful silence. No frantic phone calls, no desperate text messages, no elaborate explanations about charity work and old friendships. For the first time in months, I could think clearly without the constant background noise of Samantha's deceptions. Maya stopped by Thursday evening with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. You look better, she said, settling into the chair that Samantha had claimed was too uncomfortable for guests. I feel better. It's amazing how much mental energy it takes to pretend you believe someone's lies. Any word from the happy couple? Nothing direct, but I've been monitoring social media. Richard's situation is getting worse. I pulled up my laptop and showed Maya the latest developments. The society pages had picked up the story of the Ashford divorce, focusing on the unusual speed of the asset freeze and the hints of financial impropriety. Victoria's playing this perfectly, Maya observed. She's not making any public statements, but she's letting the story build momentum on its own. Old money understands the value of strategic silence. Let the facts speak for themselves. And the facts are speaking loudly. Look at this. Maya had found Richard's LinkedIn profile, which now showed him as between opportunities instead of listing his position with the family foundation. Victoria moved him out of any role that involves discretionary spending, I noted. Smart woman. What about Samantha? Still employed as far as I know, but her lifestyle is about to require some significant adjustments. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Samantha's name appeared on the screen. Should I answer it? I asked Maya. Absolutely. I want to hear how this plays out. I put the call on speaker. Hello, Samantha. Daniel, we need to talk. We talked 3 days ago. You left with your suitcases, remember? I've been staying at a hotel, but I can't afford it much longer. That does sound like a problem. My problem is that you've made it impossible for me to access the resources I need to get back on my feet. I haven't made anything impossible. I simply shared some information with someone who had a right to know about it. You destroyed Richard's marriage. Richard destroyed his own marriage. I just provided the documentation. Maya was grinning, clearly enjoying the conversation. Daniel, I'm asking you to help me fix this situation. How exactly would I do that? Call Victoria Ashford. Tell her you made a mistake. Tell her the evidence was fabricated or misinterpreted. I looked at Maya, who was shaking her head vigorously. You want me to lie to Victoria Ashford? I want you to give me a chance to rebuild my life. Your life was built on lies and someone else's money. Maybe it's time to try building something authentic. I can't do that if I'm homeless and broke. Then maybe you should have considered that before you started accepting expensive gifts from married men. Silence on the other end of the line. Samantha, are you still there? I'm here. I'm trying to figure out how you became so cruel. I'm not cruel. I'm just no longer willing to enable your choices. My choices? What about your choice to spy on me for months? My choice to document evidence of your affair? That's called protecting myself. You violated my privacy. You violated our marriage. Maya was nodding approvingly. Daniel, please, I'm asking for your help. And I'm declining to provide it. You made your choices, Samantha. Now you get to live with the consequences. What if I end the relationship with Richard? What if I come home and we try to work things out? With what money? Your salary won't cover the lifestyle you've become accustomed to. I'll adjust my lifestyle. Will you? Because you've been living in an expensive apartment, driving a luxury car, and wearing designer clothes. Are you ready to give all that up for a marriage you were willing to betray? Another long silence. I don't know, she said finally. That's an honest answer. Maybe the first one you've given me in months. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to support yourself without Richard's money and without my assistance. Daniel. Good luck, Samantha. You're going to need it. I ended the call. Maya raised her wine glass. That was beautiful. It was necessary. Think she'll keep trying? Probably, but her options are limited now. Richard can't help her financially, and I'm not going to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. What about Sophie? I thought they were best friends. Sophie has her own problems now. Her husband found out about her affair, thanks to those social media photos you uncovered. The network of lies is collapsing. Exactly. When everyone in your social circle is lying to their spouses, nobody has the moral authority to help anyone else. My phone buzzed with a text message. Victoria Ashford. Mr. Mercer, I thought you might be interested to know that my husband has agreed to a very favorable settlement in exchange for avoiding a lengthy court battle. The asset freeze will be lifted once all marital property has been properly divided. Thank you again for your assistance in this matter. I showed the message to Maya. So Richard gets some of his money back, but Victoria gets most of it? That would be my guess. And any money he does get will be closely monitored. No more discretionary funds for supporting other women. What about the corporate apartment? I'm betting that becomes part of Victoria's settlement, along with most of the liquid assets. Leaving Richard with what? Enough to live on, but not enough to maintain his previous lifestyle. And certainly not enough to support a girlfriend who's accustomed to expensive gifts. Maya finished her wine and stood up. I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Why tomorrow? Because that's when the society pages publish their weekend edition. And I have a feeling the Ashford story is going to be front-page news. She was right. Friday morning's paper featured a detailed article about the Ashford divorce, complete with speculation about the financial irregularities that had prompted such an aggressive asset freeze. The reporter had done their homework, uncovering details about Richard's discretionary spending and his charitable activities, with unnamed local business contacts. My phone rang at 8 a.m. Maya. Have you seen the paper? Reading it now. They didn't name Samantha specifically, but anyone who knows her will recognize the description. HR director at a local tech company, recently separated from her husband, known for her involvement in charity work with prominent local families. That's not exactly subtle. Victoria's sending a message. Cross the Ashford family and your business becomes public knowledge. Think Samantha has seen it? I'm sure she has. Her phone has probably been ringing all morning. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another call from Samantha. Let me guess, Maya said. She wants to discuss the newspaper article. I declined the call. I think I've said everything I need to say to Samantha. But she probably has more to say to you. My phone rang again. Then again. She's persistent, Maya observed. She's desperate. Her reputation is now a matter of public record. Her financial support has been eliminated, and her social circle is collapsing. What do you think she'll do? I think she'll try to find someone else to blame for her situation, and when that doesn't work, she'll try to find someone else to pay for her lifestyle. Any candidates? Not many. Rich men who are willing to support other men's wives are a limited demographic, and after this newspaper article, most of them will be concerned about their own reputations. My phone stopped ringing. Maybe she's given up, Maya suggested, or maybe she's regrouping, planning her next move. What could she possibly do at this point? I don't know, but I've learned not to underestimate desperate people. I was right to be cautious. Saturday morning, I discovered that someone had spray-painted "liar" across my garage door. Saturday afternoon, my tires were slashed. Saturday evening, I found a brick through my front window with a note attached. This isn't over. I called Detective Ray Anders, an old friend from my Army days who'd ended up in local law enforcement. Looks like your divorce is getting messy, he said, examining the damage. My separation is getting messy. The divorce hasn't started yet. Any idea who might be responsible for this vandalism? I have suspicions, but no proof. Want to share those suspicions? My wife has been having an affair with Richard Ashford. I exposed the affair to his wife, which resulted in his assets being frozen and her financial support being eliminated. Ray whistled. You poked the hornet's nest. I documented evidence of adultery and shared it with the appropriate party. And now someone's taking revenge on your property. So it would seem. You want to file charges? I want to document everything, but I doubt you'll be able to prove who did this. Probably not, but if it escalates, having a paper trail will be helpful. Ray finished his report and left me with a case number and some advice about security cameras. I spent Sunday morning getting my tires replaced and my window repaired. Sunday afternoon, installing a security system that would record everything happening around my property. Sunday evening, I got a call from Victoria Ashford. "Mr. Mercer, I heard about the vandalism at your home. I wanted to apologize." "You have nothing to apologize for. I feel responsible. My actions may have created a situation that put you at risk. Your actions protected your family's assets from someone who was stealing them. Any risk I'm facing is a consequence of exposing that theft. Nevertheless, I wanted you to know that if you need any assistance, legal or otherwise, please don't hesitate to contact me." "Thank you. That's very generous." "It's practical. People who help my family can count on my family's support." The message was clear. Victoria Ashford was offering protection in exchange for the service I'd provided. I appreciate that. I also wanted you to know that my husband's settlement includes a clause requiring him to make no contact with your wife. If he violates that agreement, he forfeits additional assets. Interesting terms. I believe in thorough contracts, Mr. Mercer. Good evening. Monday morning brought a new development. Samantha's car was parked in my driveway when I left for work. She was sitting on my front steps, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't. Daniel, please. 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stopped. 5 minutes. "I know you think I'm responsible for the vandalism." "Are you?" "No. But I know who is." "I'm listening." "Richard is furious about losing his money. He blames you for destroying his marriage and ruining his reputation. Richard destroyed his own marriage by cheating on his wife with you. That's not how he sees it. How Richard sees it is no longer my concern. It should be. He's talking about making you pay for what you've done. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Richard has friends who don't care about legal consequences." I looked at her carefully. She seemed genuinely frightened. "What kind of friends?" "The kind who solve problems with violence instead of lawyers." "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I don't want you to get hurt." "That's very considerate, coming from someone who's been lying to me for months. I made mistakes, Daniel, but I never wanted anyone to get hurt. People always get hurt when marriages are destroyed by lies and adultery. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to save yourself. If something happens to me, you lose any chance of reconciliation." She looked down at her hands. "Maybe. Definitely. So what do you want me to do with this warning?" "Be careful. Richard is desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. Like spray painting garage doors and slashing tires? Like hiring people to do worse things than that." I studied her face. She seemed to be telling the truth, which was unusual for her. "Thank you for the warning." "That's it? What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to say you'll be careful." "I'll be careful. And maybe we could talk about working things out between us?" "There's nothing to work out, Samantha. You chose Richard over our marriage. Now you get to live with that choice. But Richard can't support me anymore. That's not my problem. So I'm supposed to just figure out how to survive on my own. Welcome to adulthood." She stood up slowly. "You've become a very hard man." "I've become a realistic man. There's a difference." She walked to her car, then turned back. "Be careful, Daniel. Richard's threats aren't empty." "Neither are mine." She drove away, leaving me with a new concern. If Richard was desperate enough to hire people to intimidate me, the situation was about to escalate beyond property damage. I called Maya. "I need to show you something," I said. Maya arrived at my house within 20 minutes, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the expression she reserved for serious problems. "What kind of something?" she asked. I told her about Samantha's warning and Richard's alleged threats. "You think she's telling the truth?" "For once, yes." She seemed genuinely scared. Maya opened her laptop and began typing. "Let me see what I can find about Richard's current situation." While she worked, I reviewed the security footage from my new cameras. The vandalism had occurred during the early morning hours, but the perpetrator had been careful to avoid showing their face. Interesting, Maya said after several minutes. What did you find? Richard's been busy since his assets were frozen. He's been meeting with some questionable people. She turned her laptop toward me, showing surveillance photos from a private investigator's website. How did you access this? The PI's security is terrible, but look at these photos. The images showed Richard meeting with 3 men in an industrial area of town. The men looked like they specialized in problems that couldn't be solved through legal channels. When were these taken? Yesterday afternoon, about 6 hours before your conversation with Samantha. So she was telling the truth about Richard's intentions. Appears so. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I thought about Victoria Ashford's offer of assistance. I'm going to make a phone call. Victoria answered immediately. Mrs. Ashford, I may need to take you up on your offer of assistance. What's the situation? I explained Samantha's warning and Maya's discovery of the surveillance photos. I see. That's very disappointing behavior from my soon-to-be ex-husband. I thought you should know that he's escalating beyond property damage. Indeed. Mr. Mercer, would you be available to meet this evening? I believe we should discuss this situation in person. Of course. The Yacht Club at 7 p.m. Ask for the Ashford private dining room. I'll be there. And Mr. Mercer, bring your evidence about Richard's recent activities. The Yacht Club was exactly what I expected from Victoria Ashford's world. Old money, older traditions, and the kind of quiet elegance that whispered power rather than shouting it. Victoria was waiting in a private dining room that overlooked the harbor. She was accompanied by 2 men in expensive suits who had the bearing of people accustomed to solving problems. Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming. These are my attorneys, James Morrison and David Chen. We shook hands, and I noticed that both men had the kind of firm grip that suggested they were more than just legal counsel. Please sit. I've taken the liberty of ordering dinner. The meal was excellent, but the conversation was better. Richard's behavior is becoming problematic, Victoria began. His threats against you violate the terms of our separation agreement. Which means he forfeits additional assets if he continues this behavior. James Morrison leaned forward. We've been monitoring Richard's activities since the separation began. His meeting with those men yesterday was photographed by our investigators. So you already knew about his plans? We suspected. Richard has always been prone to poor decisions when he's under pressure. David Chen placed a folder on the table. These are copies of Richard's communications over the past week. Text messages, phone calls, emails. He's been quite explicit about his intentions regarding you. I opened the folder and read through the messages. Richard's language was increasingly violent, and his plans were disturbingly specific. This is evidence of criminal conspiracy, I observed. Yes, it is, Victoria agreed. The question is how we want to handle it. What are my options? Option 1. We turn this evidence over to the police and let them arrest Richard for conspiracy to commit assault. And option 2? Victoria smiled coldly. Option 2 involves a more direct approach to problem solving. I looked at her attorneys, who were watching me carefully. What kind of direct approach? The kind that ensures Richard never threatens anyone again, but doesn't involve the complications of a criminal trial. I'm not sure I understand. James Morrison spoke up. Richard hired 3 men to intimidate you. Those men have been contacted by our associates and informed that their services are no longer required. Your associates? People who specialize in discouraging bad behavior. And Richard? Richard is about to receive a very clear message about the consequences of violating his separation agreement. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Richard has always been a coward, Mr. Mercer. He's brave when he's spending other people's money or threatening people who can't fight back. But when confronted by people who can actually hurt him, he becomes very reasonable. What happens to the men he hired? They've been convinced to find other employment, permanently. David Chen closed his folder. Richard's threats against you end tonight. You have my word on that. And in exchange? No exchange necessary. You helped my family protect our assets. We help you protect your safety. It's a simple transaction. Victoria stood up. There is one other matter we should discuss. What's that? Your wife's future employment prospects. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not sure I follow. Samantha works for Meridian Tech, which has several contracts with companies that my family controls. Her continued employment depends on those contracts being renewed. Are you threatening her job? I'm explaining the reality of her situation. Her association with Richard has made her a liability to any company that values discretion. I see. However, if she were to relocate to another city and seek employment elsewhere, those concerns would be less relevant. The message was clear. Samantha could keep working, but not here. How long does she have to make this decision? I think 30 days is reasonable. Enough time to find a new position, but not enough time to cause additional problems. I nodded. That seems fair. Excellent. Then I believe our business is concluded. Victoria walked me to the door of the dining room. Mr. Mercer, I want you to know that I don't blame you for Richard's infidelity. Men like my husband create their own problems. Thank you. However, I am grateful that you chose to handle this situation with intelligence rather than emotion. Lesser men might have resorted to violence or public scenes. Violence rarely solves anything. No, but strategic thinking often does. Good evening, Mr. Mercer. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The threats were neutralized, the evidence was documented, and the consequences were being distributed appropriately. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Samantha. Daniel, something's happened. What kind of something? Richard called me an hour ago. He was terrified. He said some men came to his apartment and told him to leave town. That sounds serious. He's packing right now. He says he's going to stay with his brother in California until things calm down. Probably a good idea. Daniel, did you do something? I shared information with people who were in a position to act on it. What kind of people? The kind who don't appreciate threats against their friends. Silence on the other end of the line. Samantha, are you still there? I'm here. I'm trying to process what's happening. What's happening is that actions have consequences. Richard threatened me, and now he's dealing with the results of that choice. And what about me? What about you? What are the consequences for my choices? You'll need to find a new job in a new city. Your reputation here is finished. How do you know that? Because I've been having conversations with people who control your professional future. You're destroying my career. Your choices destroyed your career. I'm just making sure the consequences are clear. Daniel, please, I'm begging you, don't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply no longer protecting you from the results of your own decisions. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you started accepting money from married men. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose everything. You didn't lose everything, Samantha. You traded everything for a relationship with Richard. Now that relationship is over and you get to keep what you traded for. Which is nothing. Which is exactly what you contributed to our marriage. The line went quiet. Samantha? I'm here. You have 30 days to find a new position in a new city. After that, your employment options here will become very limited. 30 days? It's more generous than you deserve. And if I refuse to leave? Then you'll discover how difficult it can be to find work when your reputation precedes you. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I've had 4 months to think about it. I hate you. I don't care. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I hung up and turned off my phone. Maya was waiting on my front porch when I walked to the door. How did it go? She asked. Better than expected. Richard's leaving town tonight and Samantha has 30 days to follow him. And then? And then I get to start rebuilding my life without liars and cheaters. What about your marriage? What marriage? Samantha destroyed that months ago when she chose Richard's money over our relationship. Maya smiled. So what's next? Next, I sell this house and move somewhere that doesn't remind me of the worst decisions I ever made. Any idea where? Somewhere warm. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere I can start over without the baggage of other people's lies. Sounds like a plan. It's the first honest plan I've made in months. We sat on my porch, watching the harbor lights reflect on the water. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I could see clearly. Samantha had made her choice. Richard had made his choice. Victoria had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. Maya? Yeah? Want to help me pack? Absolutely. The next morning, I put the house on the market. By afternoon, I had 3 offers. By evening, I'd accepted the highest one and started planning my exit from this town and everything it represented. Samantha called 6 more times over the next 2 weeks. I didn't answer any of the calls. Richard never called at all. Victoria sent a card thanking me for my professional discretion and wishing me well in my future endeavors. Maya helped me pack everything worth keeping and donated the rest to charity. On my last day in town, I drove past the yacht club where Victoria and I had our final meeting, past the office building where Samantha had worked before her reputation caught up with her choices, past the hotel where she'd stayed when Richard's money ran out. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The moving truck was loaded, my car was packed, and my new life was waiting somewhere south of here. As I drove out of town, I passed a billboard advertising the annual charity gala, the same event where Samantha and Richard had planned to make their public debut as a couple. The billboard had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "canceled" across the date. I smiled and kept driving. Some problems solve themselves. Others just need the right kind of help.